Let's go ahead and add a little bit of noise here. I'll just click on the little icon for the color channel. Apply procedural noise. I can apply curve. I can invert it. Noise degree is basically the contrast. I can change the seed. Noise scale. And when I'm happy with it, I can click done. So, how would I go about applying this? Well, the fill tool is going to fill whatever object you touch. However, you have an option here in the tool options panel. Let me go ahead and scale that up. We can apply it to an entire layer, so it's going to apply it to everything, or we can apply it to a surface or an object. In this case, it's probably quicker to just go ahead and click on this particular object. Also, if you want to apply it to everything, you could right-click on the thumbnail and choose Fill Whole Layer. That's the same thing as clicking this. And the surface allows you to apply it to a UV surface. Okay, so let's go ahead and click. And now let's adjust that just a little bit. Okay, so I can collapse this panel. And now let's go to a paintbrush. And this is the other way that you can apply it. Let's choose the airbrush. And I want to point out the difference between the paintbrush and the airbrush. Primarily, the airbrush is going to be additive. So as you continue to hover or brush in a given area, it's going to add more and more opacity. We'll leave our current brush opacity at 22%, and as we brush, it will build up from there. I'm just going to brush, brush, and I'm still holding down my stylus. And it is pressure sensitive. You could use the airbrush. Let's crank our opacity up to 100%. And we'll choose the paintbrush. Actually, let's go back down. The paintbrush, it's going to paint this amount. You can see it's pretty faint. But as I continue painting over it, it's additive. So that really is a difference between the two, in that the airbrush, as long as you're holding it down, it will continue to build. Whereas the paintbrush will only paint the specified value per stroke. As long as I keep brushing, doesn't matter. But if I stop and apply another stroke, it's additive that way. I'll click cancel. Now, if I want to delete everything on this layer, I can obviously delete it like you would in Photoshop, but you can also delete just the work on that layer and leave the layer intact. So if I want to continue working on this layer, again, I can just hit the delete key, and it's going to remove whatever channel is active. So if I uncheck glossiness and depth, it's only going to remove the color. So when I hit delete, you can see the glossiness and the depth was left behind. Now if I hit delete, it's all gone. So these are common parameters for like your opacity, glossiness, metalness, and also you can invert tool action. You have steady stroke. You also happen to have more control for tapering your brush strokes. So if you want it to taper at the beginning and also at the end, you may want to change this. And then you can check enable tapering. Modulate tapering with pen pressure. And then also the length of your stroke. It's going to apply it along this length. So we may want to adjust that accordingly. So hit cancel. You can assign a hotkey to this so that if you're making a lot of changes to the tapering, you can just invoke it with a hotkey. One other noteworthy feature is adjustments from the textures menu. Go to adjust, and you have a number of different options here. You can smooth, which is like applying a Gaussian blur. You can sharpen, apply hue, saturation, and lightness to a given layer. You have the preview option here. You can adjust brightness, gamma, and whatnot. Now let's talk about Photoshop linkage. It's as simple as hitting a keyboard combination. However, you could go to the Edit menu and choose Edit All Layers in Current Editor. You also have the ability to edit projections in External Editor. You can adjust the scale when you're using projection. But the main one you're going to want to use is this one, Edit All Layers in External Editor. So it's going to take all these layers, even if you have layer groups, which this icon will create a layer group, and you can drag and drop your layers into it. And Photoshop will respect it. And likewise, your layer groups from Photoshop will also come in as a layer group here. So again, it's very tight linkage, and let's just go ahead and hit Control P. 3D Coat will then provide a prompt asking which UV map you want to work with. You can see it firing up Photoshop. It's going to bring it to the forefront. And it's also going to send over a wireframe layer at the very bottom. You can reorder this and place it over the top if you need. Let's switch to the brush tool and go over to the top, select that layer. And now all I have to do is hit Control S. So Control P to send it to Photoshop, Control S to save, and go back to 3D Coat. It should update. There you go. So I can go ahead and delete that layer if I want. Now there are a couple things I should point out before we finish here, and that is you can save this layout or go back to the default through the Windows menu. Reset this page to default. If I wanted to save that one, I could store the workspace and then restore it at another time. Now I want to go ahead and close this smart material. When you see that preview options panel, it means it's still active. You can change the thumbnails through these list menus. Let's choose normal. Sometimes you may see something like this, but just make a slight adjustment and it will refresh. Alright, so that's a quick look at working in the Paint workspace in 3D Coat. Stay tuned and thank you for watching.